Nathaniel Grant surveyed the bustling dining room of the Hearthstone, a warm, contented smile playing on his lips. At 38, he had poured every ounce of his passion, savings, and sweat into this place, transforming a dilapidated warehouse in East Austin into a culinary haven. The scent of roasted herbs, fresh-baked bread, and rich coffee mingled in the air, a symphony of aromas that spoke of comfort and quality. Every table was filled, the low hum of happy conversation punctuated by the clinking of silverware and the occasional burst of laughter. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was a living, breathing testament to his dream. The Hearthstone was renowned for its farm-to-table philosophy, a concept Nathaniel had championed from day one. He'd spent years cultivating relationships with local farmers, ensuring every ingredient was fresh, seasonal, and ethically sourced. His vision was simple: good food, honest ingredients, and a welcoming atmosphere where people felt like family. This ethos had resonated deeply with Austin's vibrant community, earning them rave reviews, a loyal following, and a coveted spot on numerous Best of Austin lists. Behind the culinary magic was Leo Maxwell, Nathaniel's best friend since college and the brilliant head chef. Leo was a culinary artist, capable of transforming Nathaniel's carefully sourced ingredients into exquisite, unforgettable dishes. Their partnership was seamless. Nathaniel handled the business, the logistics, the front-of-house charm, while Leo commanded the kitchen, a whirlwind of creative energy and precision. They were two halves of a perfect whole. Their friendship forged in shared dreams and countless late nights perfecting recipes and business plans. Leo had even invested a significant portion of his own savings, cementing their bond both personally and professionally. Tonight was particularly significant. They were hosting a private tasting for a group of influential investors from San Francisco, a crucial step towards securing funding for their planned expansion. A second, larger location in South Austin, complete with its own urban farm. Nathaniel had been meticulously preparing for this meeting for months, poring over financial projections, architectural sketches for the new space, and detailed marketing strategies. He'd even commissioned a special, limited edition menu for the tasting, a showcase of Leo's most innovative dishes. Nathaniel adjusted his crisp white chef's coat, a habit he'd picked up from Leo despite spending most of his time front of house. His dark hair, usually a bit unruly, was neatly combed, and his hazel eyes, usually alight with a playful spark, held a serious, focused glint. He walked through the kitchen, a controlled chaos of sizzling pans, shouted orders, and the rhythmic chop of knives. Leo, a blur of motion, was at the pass, his brow furrowed in concentration as he plated a delicate salmon dish. "Everything on track, chef?" Nathaniel asked, his voice low, just above the din. Leo glanced up, a quick, almost imperceptible nod. "Running a tight ship, Nathaniel. Plates are flying out. Investors seem impressed." His voice was a little strained, his usual easy banter absent. Nathaniel chalked it up to the pressure of the moment. Leo always got intense before big events. "Great," Nathaniel said, clapping him lightly on the shoulder. "Just keep doing what you do. This is it, buddy. Our big break." Leo didn't respond, just turned back to his plating, his shoulders stiff. A fleeting flicker of unease darted through Nathaniel, but he dismissed it. Nerves. They both had them. The tasting went flawlessly. The investors, a group of sharp-suited individuals, murmured their approval with each course. Leo's dishes were, as always, a revelation. The earthy beet risotto, the perfectly seared scallops, and the innovative deconstructed key lime pie. Nathaniel presented each dish with a passionate explanation of its local origins, the story behind the farm, the philosophy woven into every bite. He felt a familiar surge of pride, a deep satisfaction in seeing his vision come to life and captivate such a discerning audience. As the final dessert plates were cleared, Mr. Sterling, the lead investor, a man with a shrewd gaze and an impeccably tailored suit, leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, Grant, Chef Maxwell," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative. "We are profoundly impressed. The culinary artistry, the commitment to local sourcing, the palpable passion, it's all exceptional. The Hearthstone is truly a gem." Nathaniel's heart swelled. This was it. The culmination of years of relentless effort, of dreams, of unwavering dedication. However, Mr. Sterling continued, and the single word hung in the air, chilling Nathaniel to the bone. The sudden shift in his tone was palpable, a discordant note in the symphony of their success. Nathaniel's eyes darted to Leo, who was standing beside him, his expression oddly neutral, almost expectant. "We have received an updated business plan," Mr. Sterling stated, his gaze now fixed on Leo. One that, while retaining the core concept of farm to table, offers a more aggressive expansion strategy, and, more importantly, a significantly revised financial model that projects higher profitability in a shorter time frame. Nathaniel's breath hitched. An updated business plan? Without his knowledge? A cold dread began to coil in his stomach. He looked at Leo, his eyes silently pleading for an explanation, for him to clarify this sudden, unsettling turn of events. But Leo avoided his gaze, his attention solely on Mr. Sterling. "Chef Maxwell," Mr. Sterling continued, "your revised submission, presented to us just yesterday, addresses several of our lingering concerns regarding market penetration and return on investment. We understand this was a last-minute adjustment, but the firm finds it incredibly compelling." Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face. His revised submission? Last night? He hadn't made any revisions. They had finalized everything hours before. A sharp, icy realization began to form in his mind, a monstrous, unthinkable truth. Leo finally turned to him, his smile now a thin, almost apologetic line. "Nathaniel, I apologize for the surprise. I felt it was crucial to present the most competitive offer possible. The investors had some reservations, and I worked through the night to address them." His voice was calm, almost too calm, laced with a practiced sincerity that suddenly felt like a venomous lie. "What are you talking about, Leo?" Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper, laced with a growing horror. "We finalized the plan. There were no further revisions." Mr. Sterling interjected, his voice firm. "Mr. Grant, Chef Maxwell presented a comprehensive, fully updated plan yesterday evening. It outlines a revised menu concept for the expansion, a rephased supply chain, and a significantly optimized financial model. All under the Hearthstone's banner, of course." He paused, then added, "We were particularly impressed with the proposed adjustments to the ingredient sourcing, Chef Maxwell. Truly ingenious." The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. Ingredient sourcing adjustments? Those were his most carefully guarded relationships, the very foundation of their farm-to-table integrity. Leo had always deferred to him on sourcing, understanding its importance to Nathaniel's vision. He had taken Nathaniel's core values, his very essence, and twisted them for profit. The room began to spin. The faces of the investors blurred into an indistinguishable mass. His vision, his dream, his legacy, stolen. Not by a competitor, but by the man who had stood by his side for 15 years, the man he had trusted implicitly, the man who was supposed to be his partner. "Leo," Nathaniel managed, his voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning rage. "What have you done?" Leo finally met his gaze, and in his eyes, Nathaniel saw not remorse, but a cold, calculated ambition he had never truly perceived. "Nathaniel," he said, his voice dropping to a low, almost conspiratorial tone, "this is business. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions for the greater good of the restaurant. You were too idealistic about the margins. I merely optimized them." Optimized them? He had gutted their integrity and presented it as his own. The betrayal was a searing brand on his heart, an agony far deeper than any professional setback. It wasn't just the restaurant. It was the shattering of a friendship, the obliteration of trust, the violent dismantling of his entire professional identity. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, seemingly oblivious to the silent, devastating war unfolding between the two partners. "Well then, Mr. Grant, Chef Maxwell," he announced, a triumphant smile now firmly in place. "It is with great pleasure that our firm officially commits to funding the expansion of the Hearthstone. We look forward to a successful collaboration." Nathaniel heard the words, but they sounded distant, muffled, as if he were underwater. The congratulations, the polite applause, the satisfied murmurs of the investors, it all faded into a deafening roar in his ears. He felt a cold, hollow ache spread through his chest, a void where his trust, his dreams, and his future had once resided. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor, drawing startled glances from the investors. He didn't care. His eyes were fixed on Leo, who now looked slightly uncomfortable, a faint flush rising on his cheeks. "You absolute snake," Nathaniel whispered, his voice raw with emotion, though it was barely audible above the polite chatter. He didn't wait for a response. He couldn't. The air in the room felt suffocating, poisoned by Leo's deceit. He turned and walked out, his steps stiff and deliberate, leaving behind the shattered remnants of his career, his partnership, and his trust. As he stepped out of the warm, inviting glow of the Hearthstone and onto the cool, bustling streets of East Austin, The vibrant city he loved felt alien, hostile. The familiar scent of food trucks and live music, usually comforting, now felt like a cruel mockery. He walked aimlessly, the sounds of traffic, distant laughter, and chattering pedestrians blending into a cacophony that mirrored the chaos in his mind. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, probably Leo, trying to smooth things over, or a concerned server. He ignored it all. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Leo, his friend, his partner. The man he had shared countless dreams with, celebrated victories with, and confided in during moments of doubt. He had not only stolen his vision, but had done so with a chilling, calculated precision, right under his nose, in the very space they had built together. How could he have been so blind? How could he have missed the signs? Had he always been this ruthless, hiding it beneath a veneer of charm and camaraderie? His mind replayed the entire tasting, searching for clues, for any hint of his deception. The strained voice, the stiff shoulders, the overly confident tone, they all clicked into place, forming a grotesque mosaic of his treachery. The hearthstone, his masterpiece, was now tainted, a monument to Leo's betrayal. Nathaniel found himself standing by Lady Bird Lake, the calm water reflecting the twinkling lights of the city skyline. The iconic view, usually a comforting sight, now felt like a symbol of division, a chasm between his past and a terrifying, uncertain future. The cool night air settled around him, but its chill did nothing to dispel the cold emptiness that had taken root in his soul. Everything he had worked for, everything he had believed in, had been reduced to ashes in a single devastating moment. He was adrift, anchorless, in a world that suddenly felt entirely foreign. The blueprint of his life, once so perfectly rendered, had been violently torn apart. The cool Austin night air offered no solace to Nathaniel Grant. He walked aimlessly, the vibrant energy of East Austin, usually a source of comfort and inspiration, now felt like a cruel, mocking symphony. The scent of barbecue smoke from distant food trucks, the faint thrum of live music from 6th Street, the easy laughter spilling from bar patios, it all grated on his raw nerves. He was numb, lost somewhere between disbelief and an overwhelming urge to scream. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Leo, his best friend, his partner, the man he had trusted with everything, who had just systematically dismantled his life's work in front of his eyes. How could this have happened? How could Leo, the man he had built the hearthstone with, the man who had shared his dreams, his struggles, his triumphs, betray him with such cold, calculated precision? Nathaniel's hands clenched into fists, his body rigid with a potent mix of anger, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. The city around him, usually a familiar embrace, now felt vast and indifferent, its lights cold and distant. He couldn't go back to the hearthstone. Not tonight. He couldn't face the reality of it all. Couldn't look at the place that once felt like home, a space he had poured his soul into, now tainted by Leo's deceit. He wasn't ready to confront Leo again, to deal with the 1,000 questions that raced through his mind. So, he just walked. Each step was heavy, a testament to the emotional burden he carried. He didn't know where he was going, didn't care. The streets were busy, full of people who seemed to have their lives in order, who weren't stuck in this moment of personal devastation. And then, his mind immediately went to Leo. The memories flooded back, the countless nights they spent together in that cramped apartment, meticulously planning the hearthstone, their shared excitement over finding the perfect local farm, how they'd supported each other through every challenge, every setback. Leo, the man who had been his closest confidant, the one he had trusted with his vision, his passion, his very future. Now, he felt like a stranger, a venomous snake. How had he not seen the signs? How had he missed the obvious? How long had Leo been planning this, meticulously weaving his web of lies and deceit? Nathaniel's thoughts spiraled out of control, a vortex of pain and disbelief. Before he knew it, he found himself standing outside a dimly lit bar on South Congress, its neon sign flickering erratically. He had no intention of going in, no real desire to drink or socialize, but something about the place felt like a refuge, a dark corner where he could disappear. Inside, the chatter and blues music blended into a dull background hum as Nathaniel sat down at the bar, ordering a whiskey he barely tasted. As he sipped the burning liquid, he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Every time he closed his eyes, all he could see was Leo's face, his practiced sincerity, the cold ambition in his eyes, and then the image of Mr. Sterling, the investor, nodding in approval. How could this happen? He stared into his glass, lost in thought, when a voice broke through the fog of his mind. Nathaniel. Is that really you? Nathaniel turned, surprised to see his older sister Olivia, standing at the end of the bar, looking both concerned and relieved. Olivia, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had always been his rock, felt like a lifeline in the middle of this storm. She had moved to Austin a few years ago, and they saw each other regularly, but he hadn't expected to see her here, now. Liv, Nathaniel muttered, his voice hoarse. What are you doing here? I should ask you the same thing, Olivia said, sliding into the seat next to him, her gaze piercing. I've been trying to call you. Your phone went straight to voicemail. I figured you might need someone to talk to. I heard about the Hearthstone, and Leo. Her voice softened, laced with a quiet understanding. Nathaniel took another sip of his drink, trying to compose himself. I don't know where to start, Liv. Olivia sighed, her hand gently covering his on the bar. I'm so sorry, Nat. I know how much that place meant to you. And Leo. I always had my reservations about him, but I never thought he'd go this far. Nathaniel couldn't bring himself to look at Olivia. His thoughts were still tangled in the mess of what had happened, and no matter how hard he tried, it all came crashing down again. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that Leo, of all people, had been the one to destroy his life's work. He stole it, Liv, Nathaniel said finally, his voice barely a whisper, the words tasting like ash. My vision, my sourcing. He presented it as his own, with a revised plan that cut corners on everything I believed in. He admitted it, said I was too idealistic about the margins. He called it business. Olivia's face hardened, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. That's not business, Nat. That's theft. And betrayal of the highest order. She squeezed his hand. You're in shock. You don't have to figure everything out right now. I don't know how to even begin to fix this, Nathaniel replied, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. I feel like everything I've built has just crumbled. The Hearthstone was my life, my identity. I can't go back. I can't face him. What the hell do I do now? Olivia reached out, placing her other hand on his arm. You take it one step at a time, Nat. You don't have to have all the answers right now. This is a huge betrayal. And I'm not going to let it's going to take time. But you've got me. You've got Mom and Dad. And we'll be here for you, no matter what. Nathaniel nodded, the tears threatening to fall, but he couldn't bring himself to cry. Not here, not in front of Olivia, he thought. The idea of crying felt so foreign now. He had spent so much of his life suppressing his emotions, thinking that tireless work and achieving his culinary dream were the answers to everything. But now, all those achievements felt hollow. Nothing mattered. The only thing that felt real was the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, the hollow emptiness that weighed down on him every moment. I don't know what to do about Leo, Nathaniel said, his voice shaking. He's been my best friend for years. He was there when I conceptualized the Hearthstone. He was there for every late night, every challenge. How could he do this to me? How could I not see it? Olivia shook her head slowly, her expression pained. I don't know, Nat. I wish I could explain it. But what matters now is what you do next. You can't control what happened, but you can control how you move forward. You need to get some space from this. Nathaniel took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. He was angry, but more than that, he was deeply, profoundly hurt. He wasn't sure what the future held. His life, once full of certainty, now felt like a house of cards ready to fall at any moment. The thought of confronting Leo again filled him with dread. He couldn't face him yet, not when the betrayal was so raw. But Olivia was right, couldn't stay in this place forever, drowning in his grief and anger. I need to get out of here, Nathaniel muttered, looking up at Olivia, his eyes still clouded with pain. I can't stay in Austin. Not right now. It's all too much. Olivia nodded. I have a small cabin up in the Texas Hill Country, near Wimberley. It's rustic, quiet. You can crash there for a while. Get away from all this. We'll figure it out. You don't need to be alone in all of this. Nathaniel considered Olivia's offer, feeling a flicker of relief at the thought of a change of scenery, away from the city where everything had fallen apart. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something new. Or maybe it would just give him the time and space he needed to process everything. Either way, he couldn't stay in his old life. Not yet. Thanks, Liv, Nathaniel said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. I appreciate it. I don't know what I would do without you right now. Olivia smiled softly, her expression gentle. You've got me, Nat, and you'll get through this. It'll be hard, but you'll get through it. one day at a time. The drive to Wimberley felt like a journey into another dimension. The bustling highways of Austin slowly gave way to winding country roads, flanked by ancient live oaks and rolling hills. The air grew cleaner, cooler, carrying the scent of cedar and damp earth. Nathaniel watched the landscape change, each mile putting more distance between him and the shattered remnants of his life. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible easing of the suffocating pressure in his chest. Olivia's cabin was exactly as she described, rustic, secluded, and utterly peaceful. Tucked away amidst a grove of trees, it was a small wooden structure with a wide, welcoming porch. Inside, it was simple but cozy, with a stone fireplace, a worn leather armchair, and a small, functional kitchen. There was no Wi-Fi, and his phone signal was spotty at best. A blessing in disguise, Nathaniel realized. He needed to disconnect. He spent the first few days in a haze, the quiet solitude amplifying the echoes of his pain. He would wake with a start, the betrayal fresh in his mind, and spend hours staring out at the trees, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets or the rustle of leaves in the wind. He tried to read, but the words blurred. He tried to cook, but the joy had vanished from his hands. The phone calls from his parents, full of sympathy and concern, felt distant, almost unreal. Only Olivia's occasional texts, short and to the point, felt grounding. On the fourth morning, Olivia called. "Nat, you can't stay cooped up there forever," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It's time to get some fresh air. You need to do something. Anything." Nathaniel had barely left the cabin since the day Leo told him everything. Every time he thought about leaving, the weight of it all would sink in again: the betrayal, the lies, the shattered future. But Olivia was right. He couldn't hide from it forever, and as much as he wanted to stay cocooned in his grief, the world was still turning. He couldn't stop it. "Okay, Liv," he said, his voice raspy. I'll go for a walk." He hung up and slowly pulled on a light jacket. Stepping out onto the porch, he took a deep, shaky breath. The air was cool and clean, carrying the earthy scent of the woods. He started walking, following a narrow dirt path that wound through the trees. The sounds of nature slowly began to penetrate the fog in his mind. The chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of a creek. He walked for what felt like hours, his legs aching, his mind slowly clearing. He found himself by a small, crystal-clear creek, its water babbling over smooth, moss-covered stones. He sat down on a large rock, watching the water flow, mesmerized by its steady, relentless movement. It kept going, no matter what. It didn't stop for anything. For the first time in days, Nathaniel allowed himself to simply be. The cool air, the sound of the water, the gentle rustle of the leaves. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He didn't have all the answers yet. He wasn't fixed. But for a few minutes, he could just exist, unburdened by the weight of his shattered past. As he stood up to leave, he felt a small flicker of hope faint. But there, he had taken the first step. And that, for now, was enough. The days after Nathaniel moved into Olivia's cabin felt like a slow descent into an unfamiliar world. He had traded the chaotic, fast-paced life he had spent years building in Austin for a quieter, slower existence in the Texas Hill Country. But the transition wasn't easy. It was as if he had woken up in a different life, a life that didn't feel like his own. His mind constantly raced between flashbacks of Leo's cold, calculating eyes and the triumphant smile of Mr. Sterling. Nathaniel knew he had to find a way to cope, to rebuild, but the weight of everything that had happened was crushing. The cabin, though small and rustic, was a sanctuary, tucked away in a corner of Wimberley that felt worlds away from the life he had known. It was an old structure, full of character, the wooden floors creaking with every step, the windows offering a view of ancient live oaks and the occasional deer, a far cry from the bustling kitchen and vibrant dining room of the Hearthstone, where he had imagined his future. He spent the first few days in a haze, mindlessly scrolling through news articles on his phone when he could get a signal, checking the occasional work message from his old suppliers, who, surprisingly, still reached out with genuine concern, and trying to focus on anything but the aching void that had replaced his heart. His phone had stopped buzzing with messages from Leo, the ones that once made him feel connected, important, and part of a shared dream. Now, there were only a few sympathetic texts from friends, some of whom he hadn't heard from in years, and the steady, grounding presence of Olivia's check-ins. Still, Nathaniel couldn't help but feel like a burden. How could he keep leaning on his sister for support? Wasn't it time to start fixing this? Fixing himself? On the fifth morning, Olivia insisted that Nathaniel get out of the cabin. "You can't stay here forever, Nat," she said, her voice gentle but insistent over the phone. "It's time to get some fresh air. You need to do something. Anything. Even if it's just a drive." Nathaniel had barely left the cabin since the day Leo told him everything. Every time he thought about leaving, the weight of it all would sink in again: the betrayal, the lies, the shattered future. But Olivia was right. He couldn't hide from it forever. And as much as he wanted to stay cocooned in his grief, the world was still turning. He couldn't stop it. He reluctantly agreed, and after a quick breakfast of toast and coffee, he got into his truck. He drove aimlessly at first, the winding country roads a stark contrast to Austin's grid. He found himself drawn to the small artistic town of Wimberley itself, a place known for its galleries, artisan shops, and laid-back vibe. He parked his truck and walked, the gentle hum of the town, a welcome change from the oppressive silence of the cabin. He eventually found himself outside a small, unassuming building with a hand-painted sign that read, "The Claypot Studio, Pottery and Classes." He had always appreciated craftsmanship, the tangible result of skill and dedication, something he had poured into his own culinary work. He paused, looking at the display of rustic, beautifully crafted pottery in the window. It was the kind of place that didn't draw much attention, but held a quiet, enduring beauty. It felt like the perfect spot to begin to step back into life. The studio was relatively empty, save for a woman hunched over a pottery wheel in the back, her hands covered in clay, completely absorbed in her work. The atmosphere was warm, with the earthy smell of damp clay filling the air. Nathaniel sat down on a small wooden bench near the entrance, his eyes automatically drifting to the spinning wheel, mesmerized by the way the shapeless lump of clay slowly transformed under her skilled hands. "Lost in thought?" a soft voice asked. Nathaniel looked up, surprised to see the woman from the wheel standing over him, wiping her hands on an apron. She was in her late 40s, with kind eyes framed by laugh lines and a dusting of gray in her dark curly hair. "Something like that," Nathaniel admitted, feeling a faint blush creep up his neck. "It's fascinating to watch." She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "It's therapeutic. My name's Sarah. I own this place." "Nathaniel," he replied, shaking her clay-dusted hand. I used to work with my hands too, in a different way." Sarah's gaze was thoughtful. "I get that. There's a satisfaction in creating something tangible, isn't there? Especially when the world feels intangible." The words hit Nathaniel harder than he expected. Intangible. That was exactly how his life felt right now. A shattered dream, a broken promise, all the things he had built dissolving into thin air. "You can't keep doing this," Sarah said, her voice quieter this time, as if reading his thoughts. "You have to start again. You can't let them take this from you." Nathaniel looked at her, his face a mix of confusion and sorrow. "How do I even start? Where do I go from here? The future I imagined is gone. My life is in pieces, and I don't know how to put it back together." Sarah sighed and leaned against a nearby table, her voice full of concern. "You don't have to fix it all right now. Take it one step at a time. Start small. Start with the things you love. Reconnect with what makes you, you." You. Nathaniel felt a pang in his chest as he thought about the man he used to be. The man who had dreams, ambition, and a sense of direction. The man who believed that everything would fall into place as long as he worked hard enough. The man who had looked at Leo and believed he was everything he needed in a partner. Now, that man seemed like a stranger. How could he go back to that? "I don't even know what I love anymore, Sarah," Nathaniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so much time focused on the Hearthstone, on the expansion, on him. I don't know who I am without all that." Sarah looked at him for a long time, her gaze thoughtful. "I get that. You've been living for others, for a shared vision, for so long. Maybe now is the time to live for yourself." The words hit Nathaniel harder than he expected. Live for yourself. It sounded simple, but the implications were profound. He had always been a people pleaser, constantly striving to meet the expectations of those around him: his investors, his customers, his partner. His restaurant had been his identity, and Leo had been his world. But now, he was left standing in the rubble, unsure of who he even was without all of that. "Start small," Sarah said, as if reading his thoughts. "Maybe take up something you used to enjoy. Maybe hit the trails, try something new. It doesn't have to be huge. We even have beginner pottery classes, if you're interested." She gestured to a flyer on the wall. Nathaniel nodded slowly, the weight of those words sinking in. He had always loved hiking, exploring the natural beauty of Texas, But in the years leading up to the Hearthstone's success and the planned expansion, he had neglected that side of himself. He had traded physical well-being for endless hours in the kitchen and office. He had pushed everything else aside. "I'll think about it," Nathaniel said, though it was more of a promise to himself than anything. He didn't know how he was going to rebuild, but he had to try. He couldn't keep sitting in Olivia's cabin, letting his anger and sadness rule his life. That afternoon, Nathaniel decided to take Sarah's advice. He found a local hiking trail near the cabin, a winding path that led through dense woods and offered glimpses of the rolling hills. The air was crisp, and as he walked, he found himself drawn toward the sounds of nature. He used to come to places like this to think, years ago, when life seemed simpler. He sat on one of the benches overlooking a small valley, watching the birds soar overhead. The world felt distant from this vantage point, as if it belonged to another life. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the noise in his head, the images of Leo's betrayal, the pain of shattered trust, the broken promises. And when he opened them again, the world seemed a little clearer. For the first time in days, Nathaniel allowed himself to feel the moment. The cool air, the sound of the wind through the trees, the distant chirping of crickets. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He didn't have all the answers yet. He wasn't fixed. But for a few minutes, he could just be. As he stood up to leave, he felt a small flicker of hope faint, but there, he had taken the first step. And that, for now, was enough. Nathaniel woke up to the soft golden light streaming through the cabin window. The sky was a pale blue, the distant sound of the Texas hill country just audible from this quieter part of Wimberley. For the first time in weeks, Nathaniel felt something other than the crushing weight of betrayal. It wasn't joy, he wasn't there yet, but it was a subtle shift. He wasn't sure what it was, but something inside of him had started to stir. Maybe it was the way the sunlight filtered in, the first light of a new day. Or maybe it was the simple fact that he was still here, still breathing, still moving forward despite the chaos that had consumed his life. He had spent the last few days drifting through his new routine, a routine he hadn't asked for, but that had been imposed upon him after Leo's betrayal and the destruction of his life as he knew it. Olivia had been supportive, making sure Nathaniel didn't stay locked inside all day, convincing him to take baby steps to rebuild his life. It wasn't easy, but Olivia's constant presence, even from a distance, had become a comfort. Still, Nathaniel felt the ache deep in his chest, the remnants of the life that had slipped through his fingers. It was impossible to ignore the feeling of lost the vision of his future, the trust he had placed in Leo, now gone. He was left to pick up the pieces. The day before, after his walk, Nathaniel had found himself thinking about Sarah's pottery studio. The idea of working with his hands, of creating something tangible and real, held an unexpected appeal. It was a stark contrast to the abstract world of business plans and financial projections that had consumed him for so long. He remembered the quiet focus he'd seen in Sarah's eyes, the way the clay transformed under her touch. It felt like a world away from the betrayal, a place where he could perhaps find a different kind of truth. That morning, he found himself back at the clay pot studio. The hand-painted sign still hung crookedly, and the earthy smell of damp clay enveloped him as he stepped inside. It wasn't glamorous, nothing like the sleek, modern kitchens he was used to. It was gritty, authentic, full of the kind of energy that could either break him or build him back up. Sarah was there, wiping down a workbench, and her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Nathaniel, welcome back," she said, her smile warm. "Decided to try your hand at something new?" Nathaniel managed a small, hesitant smile. "Maybe. You mentioned beginner classes?" "Perfect timing," Sarah replied, gesturing to a small, empty wheel. "We have a class starting this afternoon. Just a few people, very relaxed, no pressure." He signed up, feeling a nervous flutter in his stomach. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. The thought of putting himself through something that required effort, especially something so unfamiliar, seemed like an impossible task when the emotional toll of the betrayal still felt so raw. But Sarah's calm demeanor was infectious, and after some back and forth in his own mind, Nathaniel reluctantly agreed to give it a try. The first few minutes on the pottery wheel felt awkward, almost comical. The lump of clay wobbled erratically, refusing to center, collapsing into a shapeless mess with every clumsy attempt to mold it. His hands, accustomed to the precise movements of a chef, felt clumsy and uncoordinated. He was stiff, unsure of his movements, but there was something freeing about it. For the first time in weeks, Nathaniel allowed himself to focus on something that wasn't heartbreak. With each failed attempt, each collapse of the clay, he released a tiny bit of the anger that had built up over the past few months. His betrayal, his heartbreak, the endless loops of thoughts about Leo, all of it started to get quieter. Each spin of the wheel felt like a step away from the emotional paralysis that had held him captive. Sarah, observing from a distance, walked over. "It's about patience, Nathaniel," she said gently, her hands guiding his, her touch firm and reassuring. "You have to be gentle, but firm. Let the clay guide you, but also guide the clay. It's a dance." Nathaniel didn't know why, but those words hit him in a way nothing else had. He wasn't just trying to make a pot. He was trying to take control, to claim a small piece of his life back. There was a rhythm to it that felt more familiar than he expected, echoing the meditative focus he once found in the kitchen. His muscles began to work in unison with his mind, his body working to release the thoughts that had been suffocating him. The clay, once resistant, slowly began to respond, rising into a tentative, wobbly cylinder. The sting in his knuckles didn't matter anymore. The ache in his arms was nothing compared to the emotional weight he'd been carrying. He had to keep moving forward. This, he thought, was a small way to start. By the time the session ended, Nathaniel was exhausted, his body sore, his hands covered in clay, his mind surprisingly clear. The physical exhaustion was welcome, a stark contrast to the mental fatigue that had plagued him. As he walked out of the studio, the world didn't seem so daunting. It wasn't that his problems had disappeared, but for the first time in a while, he felt like he had control. Even if it was only for a moment, the weight on his shoulders had lifted, just a little. That evening, Olivia called. "How was your day, Nat?" she asked, her voice light. I tried pottery," Nathaniel admitted, a faint smile on his face. "It was harder than it looks, but good, really good," Olivia chuckled. "See? I told you. You have to find those things again, Nat. You can't spend all your time looking back at what you lost. There's still a lot in front of you." The next day, Nathaniel signed up for another class, and then another. He found himself spending hours at the studio, losing himself in the tactile process of creation. He wasn't making masterpieces, but each lopsided bowl, each uneven mug, was a testament to his resilience, a tangible representation of his slow, arduous journey back to himself. He began to explore the small town, discovering hidden cafes, local art galleries, and the quiet beauty of the hill country. Slowly but surely, he began to build a new life, a new rhythm. His days were filled with the earthy scent of clay, quiet walks through the woods, and the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding. Slowly but surely, he began to remember who he was before Leo, before the hearthstone, before the betrayal. He wasn't just the man who had been wronged. He was a man who could rebuild, who could take control of his own narrative. The road ahead was uncertain, and he wasn't sure when or if he'd ever truly heal. But Nathaniel had learned one thing in the last few weeks. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding a way to live with the past, to move forward despite it. And for the first time in a long while, he was ready to face the future, one lump of clay at a time. The weeks that followed marked a turning point in Nathaniel's life. His pottery, which had initially felt like an abstract idea of healing, was beginning to take shape in the real world. It hadn't been easy. There were still days when the clay refused to cooperate, when his creations collapsed, and plenty of doubts that crept in as he worked through the logistics of centering, pulling, and glazing. But as each small success stacked up, a perfectly formed bowl, a mug that held its shape, Nathaniel began to realize something important. He was capable of this. He had always been good at navigating the culinary world, learning the ins and outs of flavors, textures, and presentation. But now, doing something entirely new, without the safety net of his old identity, was exhilarating. It was also terrifying. There were moments when the fear of failure loomed large, especially in the quiet nights when he would lie awake thinking about the future. But he didn't let that fear consume him anymore. With each new piece of pottery, each new technique mastered, Nathaniel learned to trust himself. He was, after all, building something from the ground up, something that was his. His time with Sarah, once a simple pottery instructor, had evolved into something deeper. She had become a consistent presence in his life, not just as a mentor, but as someone who understood the complex layers of his world. It wasn't easy for Nathaniel to open up. He had learned that the hard way in the past, but Sarah had a way of making him feel safe. She didn't push him to talk about things he wasn't ready to, but she didn't shy away when he did. They spoke about their crafts, their aspirations, and, as time passed, more personal topics. Nathaniel started to feel comfortable with the idea of allowing someone else in, though he still carried the scars from his previous partnership. Sarah had suggested, almost casually, that he consider selling some of his pieces at the local Wimberley Market Days, a popular outdoor market held on the first Saturday of each month. It wasn't something Nathaniel had anticipated, but the idea of sharing his creations, of seeing if others would appreciate his work, intrigued him. He hadn't been to any markets like that in years, certainly not since the Hearthstone had taken all of his focus. They arrived at the market, a sprawling collection of tents and stalls buzzing with activity, live music playing in the background, and an array of local artisans and farmers milling about. Nathaniel immediately felt a nervous flutter. His hands felt clumsy, his movements hesitant as he adjusted to the bustling social environment. But Sarah, ever the calm presence, placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "You'll do fine," she said softly, her smile warm. "People here appreciate authenticity. Just be yourself." And, for the first time in a while, Nathaniel believed her. They set up a small table with a simple linen cloth, carefully arranging his bowls, mugs, and small decorative pieces. His pottery wasn't perfect, but it had a rustic charm, each piece bearing the subtle marks of his hands, a testament to his journey. As people walked by, some paused, their eyes drawn to the unique textures and earthy tones. A few picked up a mug, tracing its contours, and a surprising number made a purchase. Nathaniel found himself chatting with customers, explaining the process, the inspiration behind each piece. The conversations flowed effortlessly, and Nathaniel found himself more animated than he had been in a long time. For the first time, he felt that old fire returned, the same fire he had felt when he first conceptualized the Hearthstone, when everything was new and exciting. Later in the afternoon, as the market began to wind down, Nathaniel and Sarah found a quiet corner to sit. He had sold more pieces than he expected, and even received a few custom orders. But it wasn't just the small financial success that made Nathaniel feel a sense of accomplishment. It was the fact that he had enjoyed the experience. He hadn't felt out of place. For once, the idea of sharing his work, of connecting with people on a new level, didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a possibility. "I'm glad you pushed me to come here," Nathaniel said, taking a sip of his iced tea. "I wasn't sure at first, but this felt good. Really good." Sarah smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I knew you'd be great. You've been carrying this weight around for so long, Nathaniel. Maybe it's time to let some of it go. You're finding a new way to create, a new way to connect." The words hit him harder than he expected. It was true. He had been so focused on building a future that he had forgotten to live in the moment. He had been so consumed with the idea of fixing what was broken that he had ignored the simple joy of creating something new, something entirely his own, with his own hands. As the day wore on, Sarah and Nathaniel found themselves walking along the streets of Wimberley, the sounds of the market still buzzing in the background, but now muted by the cool evening air. The conversation shifted from pottery to something lighter, and Nathaniel found himself laughing, genuinely enjoying the simplicity of the moment. He hadn't realized how much he had missed a conversation that didn't revolve around pain, guilt, or loss. It was in this moment, walking down the quiet streets, that Nathaniel realized something significant. His life, though scarred, was not over. It was just beginning. The path wasn't clear, but for the first time, he felt a genuine sense of direction, guided not by ambition alone, but by a deeper, more authentic connection to himself and the world around him. The months that followed marked a profound new chapter in Nathaniel's life. There was a noticeable shift in how he approached both his craft and his personal relationships. The intensity that had once consumed him, the relentless pursuit of perfection in the culinary world, had mellowed. It was replaced by a steady sense of purpose and balance, a quiet confidence rooted in authenticity. He had learned to set clear boundaries, not just with his time, but with his emotional energy, committing to living with intention, something he had never truly done before. Sarah noticed the change, too. She no longer saw the constant distraction in his eyes or the lingering shadow of past pain. Instead, Nathaniel had begun to invest more deeply in the present, focusing on her, on his art, and on himself. His pottery studio, a small rented space adjacent to Sarah's, was thriving. He wasn't just making pieces. He was telling a story with each curve and glaze, a narrative of resilience and transformation. His work, once a mere therapeutic outlet, was now becoming a recognized brand in the local artisan community. That Friday evening, as Nathaniel meticulously cleaned his pottery wheel after a productive day, he felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. His kiln was full, orders were coming in steadily, and he had carved out time to meet with his sister, Olivia, for dinner, something he now prioritized regularly. It was a far cry from the days when work had consumed him, keeping him tethered to the demanding schedule of the hearthstone. He stood up, stretched, and smiled to himself. He felt different. He was different. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt like he was truly living his life, not just surviving it. Sarah had been a steady source of support through this transition. She understood the pull of ambition, the drive to create, but she also knew the importance of finding peace in the process. She had become Nathaniel's anchor, someone who didn't just stand by him, but someone who actively helped him grow and challenged him when he needed it. Their connection had deepened into a quiet, profound love, built on shared moments of creation, laughter, and vulnerability. Nathaniel had learned to be more present with her. They spent weekends exploring the hill country, cooking simple, honest meals together at the cabin, and talking about their dreams and fears. They still had their individual goals, but they were also learning how to grow together, weaving their lives into a rich tapestry. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when Nathaniel still found himself slipping back into old habits, losing track of time as he worked late into the night perfecting a glaze or a form. But he had come a long way. That particular evening, Sarah was waiting for him at their favorite local bistro, a quaint little spot tucked away on a quiet side street in Wimberley. Nathaniel hadn't seen her in a few days, as he had been caught up in the final stages of a large custom order for a gallery in Austin. But he made a promise to himself that tonight would be about them, not work. He walked into the restaurant, and there she was, sitting at their usual table by the window. Sarah looked up and smiled, the warmth in her expression making Nathaniel's heart beat a little faster. He walked over to her, leaning down to kiss her on the cheek before sitting across from her. "Hey, you," Nathaniel said, smiling back at her. "I missed you." Sarah's eyes softened. "I missed you too. How's the gallery order coming along?" Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Finished it today. It was a big one, but I'm getting better at managing the workload, learning to take it slow and not let it consume me." "That's good to hear," Sarah said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "You've been so focused lately, but it's nice to see you more balanced. You're here, with me, right now. I appreciate that." Nathaniel felt a rush of gratitude in that moment. He had struggled so much with finding balance before, with feeling like he had to prove something to the world, to Leo, to himself. But now, with Sarah by his side, he realized that it was okay to slow down, to not always be chasing the next big thing. What he had, right here, was enough. They ordered their food, and the evening passed with easy conversation, laughter, and quiet moments. For Nathaniel, it was a profound reminder that life wasn't just about what you accomplished. It was about who you shared it with. And tonight, with Sarah, he was reminded of that truth in a way he hadn't been in years. The betrayal had stripped him bare, but it had also cleared the way for something more authentic, more fulfilling. The next few months brought even more growth for Nathaniel, both personally and professionally. His pottery business continued to thrive, but now he felt more in control of it. He was taking on larger commissions, speaking at local artisan fairs, and gaining recognition beyond Wimberley. He had even started mentoring a few young potters, passing on the lessons he had learned the hard way, not just about clay, but about resilience and finding one's true path. But it wasn't just about work anymore. Nathaniel had made an effort to reconnect with his friends from Austin, some of whom he had distanced himself from during his intense focus on the hearthstone. He realized how much he had missed their company, their laughter, and their grounding presence. They had been there for him before the success, before the betrayals, and before everything that had come crashing down. Now, they were part of the new chapter of his life where he was learning to be more present, more open, and more vulnerable. One afternoon, after a successful workshop at his studio, Nathaniel received a text from his old college roommate, Marcus, asking if he wanted to meet up for a beer. Marcus had been a constant throughout Nathaniel's life, someone who had been through thick and thin with him. Though they had drifted apart after college, their bond had never truly faded. Nathaniel smiled at the message, eager to reconnect. It was another step forward, another piece of his life falling into place. They met at a brewery in Austin, one that was familiar to both of them. Marcus was already there, sitting at a picnic table, a craft beer in hand, his usual easygoing smile on his face. "There he is," Marcus said, standing up to give Nathaniel a hearty clap on the back. "The pottery guru of the hill country. You look different, man. More grounded somehow." Nathaniel laughed, feeling the weight of Marcus's words settle in. "Yeah, I guess I am. Took me a while to figure it out, but I'm getting there." Marcus gestured for him to sit down. "So, tell me everything. I heard you've been crushing it with your art, and I see you're spending time with Sarah more, huh?" Nathaniel nodded. Yeah, things have changed. I'm learning how to juggle it all. Not just work, but life. Sarah's been incredible through all of this. I've realized I need more than just professional success. I need balance. And I've started rebuilding that. Marcus raised his glass. To balance. I always thought you'd be too driven to slow down. But I'm proud of you, man. You're finally getting it right. They spent the next few hours reminiscing about college days, catching up on life, and talking about their respective careers. It felt good to reconnect, to know that even in the midst of everything Nathaniel had been through, he still had these roots, these friendships, that kept him grounded. As the evening wound down, Nathaniel found himself walking back to Sarah's studio apartment above the clay pot, his heart light. It wasn't about the success or the recognition. It was about the people he loved, the relationships that sustained him through everything. And Sarah, who had been by his side from the beginning of this journey, was at the center of it all. That night, as they sat on the couch together, Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. You've come so far, Nathaniel. I'm proud of you. Nathaniel smiled, his arm wrapping around her. I couldn't have done it without you. You've helped me see what really matters. And for that, I'm grateful. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the world no longer pressing on Nathaniel's chest. He was exactly where he needed to be. And for the first time in a long time, he realized that the future wasn't something to chase it, was something to live, right here, right now, with the people who truly mattered. The hearth of his life, once cold and shattered, was now rekindled, burning with a steady, warm glow.